Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is August 12th, 2024. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about federal government policy on elections, and this emphasis will be on following the money. And I'm not talking about how much the campaigns are spending on their actual campaigns. I'm looking at it from the perspective of what you're not hearing about money policies of both of the candidates. And what that really means is that if you get the streaming news agencies and even the streaming TV stations news, they will characterize it totally different. And you'll see what I'm talking about once I get into it. So first, I want to look at President Trump when he was president. So he had a deficit of $3 trillion. Okay, so that's what flashes up. But what you don't know is how it breaks down, because nobody tells you unless you dig through 50 things to find it. So I've done that for you. So his was based on tax cuts, and the tax cuts were $2.7 trillion. And a lot of that was for corporations, and we see what the outcome of that was, with companies hiring more people and etc. Also, this was linked to the regulations. And then he had, or his administration had, the pandemic, and they spent $3.9 trillion. Okay, so the headline was, well, he put us in debt with $3 trillion deficit. Okay, now let's look at the other side. The other side would be President Biden, and even though he's not running this time, he dropped out, as you're all aware of, I'm going to take the quantum leap and say that the Harris administration will continue these policies. Now, here's one of the big differences. The two things I told you about with President Trump came through Congress and then he signed them. With President Biden, he did a lot through executive action. And you can decide which you think is better. So he spent over $2 trillion, and like I said a second ago, didn't go through Congress. So just a flavor of what they did through executive orders. Ended the Medicaid work requirements. You probably remember that. So that was $3 billion. Thrifty Food Plan overhaul, that was $300 billion, which increased SNAP. And then we had the government contractor rule, which meant that if you had contractors, you had to pay them $15 an hour. Now that's the flavor. So what I'm trying to get you to see is, when you go through Congress and you incur a deficit, that's different than when you do executive orders. And you can't just say, well, that candidate or that president got us in debt, without giving a full accounting on why. And then you have to look at the results of that. So in general, this election, and I'm saying all this to say, with this government policy on elections, we're still on the soundbite, and it's really hard to get information on what someone's policies are. And I've been talking about this with 4 or 5 posts on elections. And the truth is that the way that we look at it needs to change a little bit, because if you follow the money, you can see that there's a difference between putting yourself in debt and positioning yourself for better things ahead, or just funding more programs through executive orders. And we need to touch upon foreign aid too, because when we are following the money, you have to understand something. The departments, like I said previously, get a budget every year. And so they might reach a point where they need additional funding to make it through the fiscal year. I gave you the example last time of us giving $109 million to Kenya for Haiti to police. Now, there's been several other actions where that type of behavior in foreign aid is happening beyond what is being funded for, and generally speaking, the American people don't find out about that. And so that's why I'm talking about it. The environmental concerns in other countries, global warming. That is one of the deals. When I'm doing my research, I keep seeing that departments are giving foreign aid to these countries without running it through Congress, and we're still getting in debt trillions of dollars, and we're just saying, well, we're in debt trillions of dollars, without explaining to the American people what you're using the money for, like I said previously. And the news media especially do not report on that. Like I told you 6 months ago, during the global summit on the environment, the United States pledged billions of dollars, yet the other nations were pledging 10 million. So we're talking about countries like China, talking about the African countries who don't budget for anything for the environment. Their economy is set up to get money from the United States and others. So what needs to happen is that, unfortunately, we need to pay more attention to where money is secretly going, and ask our politicians to lay out the money that they want to spend. This characterization of Trump and Biden administrations are totally different, even though on the surface it'll look like that they both spent money. When one spent money because there was a pandemic and it gave tax cuts, which in my opinion would have stimulated the economy, because we were at zero unemployment almost, in contrast to someone who just increases programs for entitlements, meaning for like SNAP, the Affordable Care Act, things like that, when Congress has not passed legislation, because the legislation should come from Congress. That's what they're there for, not the executive orders doling out more money. So this is George. Just listen. Let me know what you think.